Hi, everyone. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. Today's topic will be focused around merging customer success and customer experience. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Sean McDade. I'm founder and CEO of PeopleMetrics. It's great to be here today. And we're here with a special guest, and I'll let Joe introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Joe Mangiaracina. Currently, I'm a vice president of service delivery at Xerox, but in my career, I've been in the technology field my entire career in customer operations, customer service roles, leading customer operations. And my background really starts off with a family story, and that my father and my uncle ran a corner grocery store in Bristol, Pennsylvania for 50 years. And my upbringing was really around the family business. I worked there from the time I was 10 years old. And that really shaped sort of my values on how I view customers. Because it was a corner grocery store, a lot of the customers were neighbors, people we saw on a regular basis. We had relationships with them, and we really understood their needs and wants. And that face-to-face interaction, there's nothing better than that when it comes to building relationships with customers and really understanding their needs. And I watched from the time I was very young, and it kind of shaped my understanding and value of customers. So I have always wanted to meet and exceed customer expectations in any role that I've had. So I'm excited to do this. Thanks for inviting me. Look forward to the discussion.
So Joe, you've started at a grocery store where you said, the relationships are extremely important. And now you're, in one of the, most respected larger companies in the world. Could you give us a sense for how has the customer experience kind of shaped how you view these different businesses? Because they couldn't be sort of more different in size, but talk to us a little bit about how the customer experience was important at the grocery store when you were a kid,
right.
versus and how it's important now when you're dealing with, probably very large customers that are requiring a lot of you.
So it really comes down to people, right? And so one of the things that I realized is that, when you're dealing business to business, people have these impressive titles, but at the end of the day, you can connect with them at a level, person to person, where you build trust, you build respect, and you're willing to, own your performance, when you do well and when you don't do well. And I think if you can earn people's trust and respect, that you build that relationship over time, and people will continue to do business and grow their business with you over time.
Definitely. So, at PeopleMetrics, we talk a lot about this concept of a high impact customer. And what we mean by that is one that is truly meaningful to the organization, is one that you really can't afford to lose. You value this business at an individual level. So this isn't, we're not talking about Walmart's customers. We're focused more on like a B2B scenario where you have to manage the experiences a little differently than you would if you had millions and millions of customers and could accept, say, a 1 or 2% churn rate, and that makes sense to you. Talk to me a little bit about, because that's the world you're in, right? Talk to me about how you look at the client experience versus kind of how you would consider it if you had lots and lots and lots of customers and you didn't really have to kind of retain and delight each one.
Right. So it's very interesting because as a company, you have, your process, procedures, ways of doing business, but then customers have their own unique set of expectations for how they want, their relationship to be managed. And so I think that, as of late, we've been trying to, customize the experience for the customer, the way that they want to do business with us. It's not a one size fits all in any way, shape, or form. We have to, provide resources to support those high impact customers to make sure that they're well taken care of. And we need to meet with them on a regular basis to really show them what our performance looks like, and hear their feedback in terms of, what their strategic directions are, because we want to align ourselves to help them meet their strategic objectives. It's not all about us, yes, it is about us, but it's also about them. And if we want to have a long-term relationship with these clients, then we need to really, develop and grow our services to match what their strategic objectives are, even sometimes when it's not in our best interest to do so. And we have clients who are looking to reduce their costs and optimize, their relationship with us. And we'll do that. I mean, because usually either months or years down the road, because we built that trusting relationship, there's other business that will come to us, other revenue that will come to us as a result of that, trusting relationship that we've built.
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's a partnership that you have with your customers' clients, and that requires you've mentioned trust, and you've mentioned doing things that's right for them, even if in the short term it's not going to benefit you. And that's sort of the definition of a partnership to me.
Right. You want to be a trusted partner, not just a vendor.
And I think that's a really key point. Like, I just want to emphasize to the audience, we've been talking a lot about this high impact customer concept. And I think Joe did a great job explaining how that's really different than a company that, is trying to use maybe artificial intelligence to, say, kind of outsource the recovery of poor experiences at scale. Like, you can do that if you have scale and customers that you can frankly afford to lose. But if you have the type of customer that Joe is talking about, where where if they leave you or churn, it's going to be extremely painful. Setting up the services that we're about to talk about, I think, is paramount. Joe, would you agree?
Absolutely. And you have to also make available the different channels of support based on the customer's choice, right? So whether it's an AI bot, or whether it's a chat function, or whether it's a phone call, or whether it's an account manager, all those things have to be available, and the customer can choose at any point in time which one they want to use, and it needs to be seamless across all those channels.
Alexandra knows the 4 Ds of the high impact customer, because she knows I've gone through it so many times.
Yes.
Right. But we know high impact customers can be demanding, right? Like, they have high expectations. Mm-hmm. The other D I talk a lot about is distinguished. So their experience needs to be created, curated, and thought about, and not just happenstance, by result of luck. Mm-hmm. But the third D that you really talked about is, the team that gets put together. And what's that D? I'm forgetting my third D. What is the D? The team D, dedicated, right? Yeah. So there's a dedicated team, mm-hmm. And that team, like you said, can be any channel that customer wants to interact with. But for high impact customers, we find having a human available as part of that team is absolutely a requirement.
Yeah. And even a step outside, if you think, Amazon, they can afford to lose the one customer, but they don't care. They still have the multiple ways to contact support when you have an issue with an order. It's very easy to return things. So it really works on high impact, and also the companies that can afford to lose that one client.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I did want to make the point too, now that you mentioned Amazon, is that, while business to business relationships are different, business customers are also consumers, and they experience what it's like to do business with an Amazon, or take an Uber, or, a Grubhub delivery, and they see the technology that they've put in place and how easy it is to use. And then when they turn around and want to interact with your company, if they're not finding it as easy as it is with those other tools, they wonder why. And so I'm a big proponent of really looking at the software and IT infrastructure that you have in place for your customers to be able to do business with you, and make it that frictionless, experience, for them.
And that's the fourth D, Joe. Delivered. That's the fourth D. The experience needs to be delivered in as easy and frictionless way as possible. And that's the name of the game. So let's talk about the importance of putting together a extremely high level customer success team to, interact with these high impact customers and make them as successful as possible. And how customer success relates to the customer experience. So I'll throw this to you first, and then I'll add, my 2 cents on kind of how customer success and what's the importance of customer success and how it integrates into the customer experience.
If I look at, over my career, the evolution of how things have changed, right? In the past, let's say you were buying a software product from a company. You had to come in and install your own server. You had to load the software. You had to maintain the software. And once the company sold you, they were pretty much gone. So I can't tell you how many customers that we've gone into from a workflow perspective and talked to them about their document management, for example, and they had purchased software, and paid a lot of money for it and never, ever implemented it. So now you look at, the world today as it exists, and a lot of these functions are cloud-based, right? So they're easy to turn up. For example, with Amazon Web Services, you could turn up a call center in one day. Where you used to have an on-premise switch and things like that. So it's never been easier to do that. And so now really what comes into play are the people to help you get it set up, kind of hold your hand, make sure that they understand what your objectives are for the system, and then help you to configure it, tweak it, get it up and running, and then check back with you on a regular basis to make sure that, you're getting the value, of the product or service that you purchased.
Absolutely. And so when you think about customer success, and that was a great explanation of it, Joe, what we're looking at is it's a team of people who are helping you or your client become more successful using your product or service. And more successful means using it. So as Joe said, one of the worst things that can happen is if you sell a product or service, software, anything to a client, to a high impact customer, and they don't get impact out of your solution, then they're not going to renew, right? They're going to go somewhere else, or they're just going to let it die. And the hardest part in business, as we all know, is getting new customers. And once you get one, keeping them is absolutely paramount. And customer success teams exist to enable, clients to get value out of your solution. And, they're not a cost center. That's the other thing I'm going to throw that out there. I don't believe they're a cost center. I know some may look at it that way. To me, they're a retention center.
I would agree.
And how does that fit into the customer experience? The customer experience is the entire journey that your customer or client has with your organization. That includes any touches before a sale occurs. And it even is anything that happens and you interact with them, maybe even after they stop using your product or service, just to keep in touch with them in case it's needed again. Customer success is a key part of the customer experience. And it's part of what makes a customer experience very good. But the customer experience is more holistic and includes pre-sale, post-sale, and everything in between. And they're what did I say before? It's like they're like part of the same ice cream cone. There's 2 flavors in a cone, and they're all combined. But the cone is the customer experience. So, Alexandra, we have a slide, right, that sort of goes through some of the differences between the customer experience and customer success. And maybe Joe and I can have a conversation on them, because they should be merged. You should think of customer success as part of your customer experience program. That's the way I would look at it. Without great customer success, your customers are not going to have an excellent experience. It's absolutely positively required. But it is just one component of the customer experience. So that's sort of maybe one way to think about it. We have a little table that I think we can go through. So, Joe, why don't we talk about this? The primary goal of customer success, we've already touched on it, is really to get the very most out of the product or service. So how can you give us like a story of how, or your perspective on how that happens at the highest level? Like where have you seen this happening? What do people do? What does the customer success team do to make this happen?
Well, if you think about it in terms of a business-to-business relationship, a lot of times, you win these customers through an RFP process, right? And so the RFP really clearly lays out in detail what the customer expects in terms of the product or service. And, they'll go through and weight your responses based on, some weighted matrix that they put together, including price. And they'll, get down to a couple of vendors. In fact, this week I met with a large customer over a Teams meeting, and we reviewed our response and, answered any questions that they had, and really got a chance to introduce ourselves and our experience so that they feel comfortable that they've got an experienced management team that can actually deliver what they say they can. And so once let's say, for example, you win that RFP, now you've got to execute, right? So you need really tight project management for the onboarding experience. You need to have regular touch base with the client. They may have a project manager on their end as well. And, we need to make sure we sync up on schedules, installation dates, measurements, key metrics that we're going to look at on a regular basis. And really you start to communicate on a frequent basis with these folks. And that's really where you start to build that relationship, right? So it's really making sure that you deliver to the expectations of the customer. And I give an example without saying who they are, but we won a bid for one of the largest healthcare providers in the state of New Jersey. And it was a very, very tough bid, and, we won it. And we had about 60 days to turn up the relationship because they gave their other vendor notice. It turns out that customer has just, because we did so well with the onboarding and kicking off the new service, that customer has continued to add new products, new services, and the relationship has probably grown to be 3 times what the original, RFP was. So, I think that the more products and services that customers add, the more you really cement that relationship. And frankly, the harder it is for them to switch away from you to someone else.
Joe, I want to unpack something you said that I think is extremely important for our audience. So you talked about how, you went through a tough RFP process. You gave them confidence that you could deliver. Mm-hmm. And the sales process has so much to do with the customer success being successful themselves, isn't it? Like the expectations set in the sales process, which is really customer experience, mm-hmm. and then transferring it over to customer success. That seems to me to be an extremely important point, that they have to be symbiotically related between the two of them to really make it successful for the customer.
Yes. And where I've seen that, succeed is where the sales and the success or service organizations work closely together during the RFP process. And so they're checking in to say, can we do this? And, should we commit to this? What's the possible, upside or downside if we do? What additional resources might we need to be able to deliver that, so they can look at the profitability potentially of the deal. And then, when the deal's signed, it's kind of your shot out of a cannon. It's time to, perform, right? So if the customer success organization or service organization is not involved up to that point, now you're trying to transition to a team that has no idea what you agreed to, right? So, in the case that I just mentioned, I had been involved through the process. And so when the ink, was put on paper, I was ready to go.
Without a doubt, I can just tell you at PeopleMetrics, we almost always, when we're getting close to, coming up into an agreement, we will have one of we call them customer experience managers, but they're, a customer success team, have them, enter the conversation. So the new client is comfortable with, who they'd be working with. The customer success person is able to give input into the design and deliverables and how the program will work. So like you said, it's not a surprise once this is signed, that it's a seamless transition from sales to success for the customer. And it's not about us, right? We can throw out these names. It's about the customer, right? It's helping them achieve their objectives. And that's really, to me, the best way to do it is when sales and service are integrated in a really tight way, all on behalf of the customer. And that's truly a customer-centric culture. When you can get that, that's what we mean by customer centricity.
Yeah. And I really see that as an evolution. During my career, it's not always been that way. It's been siloed to some degree. You have separate organizations that, think and act differently. In some cases, actually almost a confrontational type of relationship, which is not good, right? So the customer gets caught in the middle of that. But I see the evolution and understanding that the post-sales experience is just as important, if not more so. If you want to really, deliver and be able to retain that customer.
Yeah, if you're responsible for the customer experience and you want the overall relationship you have with that customer to be as good as it can be, especially a high impact customer, you must look at how sales and service are integrated from the outset, because that is the way that relationship becomes the strongest it can be. Let's get to the second one.
Yes, that leads into our second one very well, actually.
Right. So when we think of the customer journey, customer success really is the post-sale part of it as a strict definition. Now, we just talked about the best transition is when sales and service are integrated, but customer experience is the full journey. It's pre-sale, it's post-sale, it's post offboarding. If the client goes in another direction, that's the whole experience, and customer success fits into that around post-sale.
True.
Let's get to the next one, Alexandra. I think this is interesting. So what are the key touch points for customer success? And I think it's, you've already mentioned these, the three ones I think about is there has to be a smooth onboarding. When there's a problem, it gets escalated, and then they're absolutely responsible for renewing each year. Do you agree with those points? And would you add anything to that?
No, I do agree. Yes.
Yeah. Where customer experience, it would be all other touch points. So customer experience is around pre-sale. It's around digital experiences they might have with apps, websites, portals that you might offer. It's any experiences that they have in store, if that's something that you have, or at conferences, if that's something that you have. It's everything. It's every touch point. And we've had PeopleMetrics lives on mapping the customer journey. The customer success part of that should absolutely be part of your journey map, right? So it's onboarding, escalation, renewal has to be core parts of the customer journey.
And you said something, mapping, I really agree. You need to plot out the customer touch points, for the experience, right? So that they're not just random. And that, because if you're not hearing from a customer, that's not always a good thing either. You can't assume the relationship is going well. So, one of the things that, that I advocate for, and we do with a lot of our large accounts, are quarterly business reviews, because the customer really doesn't know what you're doing for them unless you tell them on a regular basis. They're busy doing their jobs, and basically the function that they've trusted you with is something that you may be doing, and they're not aware of what you're doing. So one of the things we always do is we start off with a slide that shows what the customer's strategic goals are and how we're helping them to achieve those strategic goals through the relationship that we have.
I love that, Joe. I think QBRs are extremely beneficial to the customer. And I think that just to go back to the mapping part, look, customers will have experiences whether you intentionally create them or not. What a journey map does is allow you to really think about what kind of experience do you want the customer to have at key touch points or moments of truth. QBRs allow you to review, did those happen, as well as, of course, feedback programs like what PeopleMetrics provides. And that's a great, I'd say, input to this for discussion at a QBR as well. Joe, I don't know if that's ever been something you've done, but that's I think a very interesting idea as well.
We would definitely include voice of the customer, and keep in mind that, as in a business-to-business relationship, you may be dealing with the decision makers, but maybe the end users of the service are others within the company, and the folks you have a relationship with may approve of the relationship and think you're doing a great job, but if the end users who use the product or service don't, then that's an issue.
Without a doubt. Yep. Okay, Alexander, we have a couple more. KPIs. So the main KPI for customer success is really customer retention. That's what they look at. I know there's other ones, but the name of the game is, are you renewing your customers, and the experience they have with onboarding escalation will link to renewal. For customer experience, NPS is typically the one that everybody looks at, and a promoter score, which is a very good relationship measure. Others that we look at are customer satisfaction and this effort piece, which gets to whether the experiences are frictionless. Now, these are certainly metrics you could use in customer success as well. You want as little effort as possible with your clients, interacting with the product or service and your team. But any comments on kind of KPIs you've used in the past or currently, Joe, and does this resonate?
I would say on top of the customer retention, you want to see if their total spend with you is increasing over time, product and services that they're adding as well. The Net Promoter Score, all of those voice of customer. I think what's important too is that if you get scores that are not really satisfactory or comments in those, that you proactively reach out to those customers. I find customers are shocked when you call them if they put in a bad survey. And you have a real recovery opportunity there to really fix the relationship, make sure that it stays strong.
I mean, we're huge fans of closing the loop with customer feedback, especially when it's a negative comment. We've done PeopleMetrics Lives on that, as well as closing the loop with your team when they put a very positive comment about a certain individual that may have gone above and beyond or really solved a problem for them or a pain point.
Yes.
And that keeps the team morale up. Like, what I'm doing really matters to my customer.
Right. I also, when there's a negative survey, I'll tend to look at the underlying process. Is the process broken? Do we need to fix it? I'm a Six Sigma guy. So, I really say, if you have good people operating in bad process, it yields bad results, and it's not the people in a lot of cases.
Joe, one of the things we do for many of our clients is we create what we call root cause tags that they tag each negative alert. We call them alerts, but negative surveys that come out. And when they're talking to the customer, they have, we work with them to come up with custom tags that we're kind of seeing from their comments. And then they are able to identify what the root cause was for that negative experience. And over time, they're able to start seeing patterns of, wow, this is really a root cause that we have to fix systemically across the organization to prevent this from happening in the future. So we're big fans on that. And then we have one more, right, Alexandra?
Yep. Last but not least.
This is a super important point. And Joe, maybe you can comment on this. I think the best customer success teams are proactive, meaning they're not sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring. And could you comment on that and tell us like kind of how you see that with regard to the teams that you've managed or interacted with?
Yeah, I think the proactive piece is really the regular program touch points where if you're not hearing from the customer, you're still reaching out. How's everything going? Anything change in the organization? Even sometimes your decision makers change, right? And that's a real key time when you need to possibly go make a face-to-face visit, or make more time to build a relationship with that new decision maker. Because a lot of times, at least from my experience, I've seen, let's say a new purchasing agent comes into town and they're going to, they're going to save the day, and they're going to choose their own provider, and they're going to basically wipe the slate clean, and everything you did the last couple of years doesn't matter, right? So unless you can convince them that you're a trusted vendor and build that relationship, then you could be in jeopardy even if you're doing a great job.
Without a doubt. You mentioned an example of a proactive action, which is a quarterly business review, which is proactively talking about how things are going. Right. Another example that I've seen is regular meetings around product roadmap on what's coming up and how it might be able to fit in, what new features, functionality, if it's software, may help solve some pain points for the client. And it's just and having your customer success managers really looking at your client's account and seeing, what's the usage like? Where's the heavy users? Where are any problems, any error pages that got hit? And proactively reaching out to say, hey, I'm seeing this. Here's a solution, or I'm seeing this. How can we get this group to use the product more? I'm seeing this. It's like it's a way to very proactively enable value creation from the client perspective.
Right. One thing we didn't talk about too was the CRM systems, right? So that's a place where really all the customer interaction should be stored. And I guess my experience has been that if it requires somebody to key something into the system, a lot of times people don't do it. And I think you have to really create that discipline that every single touch that customer has, whether it's proactive or reactive, is visible to anybody who is servicing that account, whether it's a proactive or reactive approach.
So example of reactive is closing the loop that we talked about just a second ago. So if a customer indicates they had a negative experience with the product or service or whatever the touch point is, you're understanding that, absorbing it, you have a process to follow up. Someone is recording that either in a software platform like PeopleMetrics, or we integrate with things like Salesforce, Joe. So we have automatic integrations and it flows right into the CRM. So then the CRM is able to keep the record as the source of the customer source of all customer things. It's always in the CRM. So that's reactive is what that is. And that at a high level, I hope that gives people an idea of how customer success and customer experience differ, but yet are highly symbolically linked and symbiotically linked, and they're one and the same in many ways. Customer success is just a part of customer experience.
All right, well, we're just about at time, a little over, but let's get one question in here. So what's the best way for sales and customer experience teams to communicate to ensure products are being pitched accurately and up to date?
I'll take that one. I think I had talked about it before in that, I think bringing the teams in early to the sales process to make sure that we can validate that the product or service can do what the customer wants it to do, and or whether there's other resources required to make that happen, or specialized training. So I think the earlier that those teams are brought in, the better.
Let's squeeze one more in, actually. This is a good one because you just touched on this. How do I incorporate quarterly business reviews with my current clients without making it sound like a sales pitch?
That's a good question. We really focus on the relationship and showing metrics, showing performance, and holding ourselves accountable in front of the customer, right? So it's not a sales pitch. Sometimes out of those meetings, opportunities develop through the conversation. And if there's new strategic initiatives that the customer has, how can we help you with those? But I think it's you build that over time as you have these QBRs with the customer, that you really show that, you know, I'm putting my cards on the table, I'm showing you how we're doing, and I'm bearing, you know, our performance in front of you and holding myself accountable. And sometimes it's great if you're doing a great job, and sometimes it's painful when you're not.
But that's what partnerships are all about, right? Complete transparency, trust. Right. Let's talk about how we're doing. And, you know, I never think of things as sales pitches. I think of them, if we can solve a problem that a client has, then we're doing them and us, you know, that's what we should be doing, right? We're part of the team. And just rolling back to the high impact customer, that's how you have to interact with high impact customers. You have to think about, how can we solve their problems? If you solve their problems, reduce their pain, enable them to grow, then they will be partners with you. If your agenda is your agenda in terms of just increasing revenue or whatever, without solving problems or reducing pain, then that's going to be a tough go. Right. So I never look at sales as sales. I always look at sales as solving problems.
And if you're not communicating, you may never uncover the need.
That's right. Like you can't do this with like AI bots, right? You have to get in front of people. You have to have conversations with humans, whether it's this way or, you know, in person is great also, obviously, as the world comes back a little bit. But you have to communicate with the client. I say this a lot to my team, Joe, like email's great and texting's great, but let's pick up the phone, or let's get on a video call, or now let's fly out and see some people, because that's the way relationships are created.
My team will tell you the same. My favorite saying is, communication is a beautiful thing.
So true.
Well, Alexandra, I know we went a little long, but I think it was yes. Totally worth it today. This was such a great session. Thank you for organizing this. And Joe, thank you for coming on board.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you. This has really been a great topic. See you next time on PeopleMetrics Live, and have a wonderful day.